talk about the recent trends in private capital and how that has led to the demand for trust companies?
You see, again, as a law firm, since we are very closely working with the banks and financial industry, our experience has been that on private banking side, the bankers have been approaching the wealthy people for some kind of investment opportunities or guiding them on what all can be done with their companies, with their structures, with their investments more and more. But generally, as law firm, we experience the other side of all these clients, and we have seen what they are expecting, advising them from time to time. So what we find the gap is that these wealthy families or the people who acquired wealth recently, so they want to know the structure of their company, how the company should be positioned, what kind of special purpose vehicle they should be having under the companies, what kind of formation should be there of the trust so that the family unity is maintained. They also want to explore opportunities, what are the legitimate means to invest money abroad. So there have been a lot of liberalization under FEMA, and now the people can visit abroad, they can invest money abroad under a lot of legitimate route. So they want to understand all that. So I think the opportunities with the bankers lies in bridging this gap of what the expectation is and what they can provide. So for example, there have been growth of trust companies as well. We understand that there is a universal trustees promoted by ICICI. There is a captive trust company which Kotak has. There is ILFS offering the trust services, and then there are family offices, at least 3-4 of them who have come across India. There are 1 or 2 foreign companies who have created trust company in Delhi and Bombay. So increasingly, if these trust companies can play an important role in not only creating the trust, but also advising these wealthy families on the creation of structures and the right structures to control their wealth, manage their wealth, and plan for succession planning, which also include estate planning on business side as well as personal side, and which also have a focus on executorship services. So there is a huge gap. So if the bankers who don't have trust companies, they partner with these trust companies and together compositely offer some kind of solution to these families, then there could be a large role which can be played by the private banking group than merely advising on the investment side.
So what is driving the need for trust company services? Is it mostly business succession planning or wealth transfer?
I think it is both. If you see on the business side, the new generation which has now joined the businesses across India with their fathers and forefathers, etc., they are all trained or studied abroad mostly, and they have an expectation. The expectation is either to have a listing of their company, public listing, or they have an idea or ambition to get private equity in their venture. So whatever they may do, it requires a lot of structuring in the company, that the company is given a clean shape and a proper share where these things could be achieved. And this also requires therefore the structuring of the company and to see how business interests of the family could be protected. From that perspective, just to cite an example, if a father has 2 sons and he has given the company to himself, his wife and 2 sons, and so one day one of the sons feel like leaving the company and selling his 25% share in the market, then the family is exposed to the participation of outsiders in the family. But supposing these shares were held under a trust and the trust had the first option to buy these shares, or some kind of structure where if somebody wants to exit, the others get an opportunity to buy back, etc., then this could have been good for the family. So from many perspectives, if they have the trust structure in place, they have got a holding structure in place and the SPV is in place, then the family wealth could be protected better, as well as the succession planning on the business side could also be done better. Similarly, there are business houses who don't have a proper succession in place. The next generation is not interested. They want to have a capable professional management to run the company. So once they think about this loud and they know how they are positioned, so it could give them an opportunity to create right structures on the succession side. So it may not be the case that somebody from the family must run the next empire. We've just seen the Tata's case where somebody from outside has come and now managing and taking over the company's Tata Group as a whole. So similar position could lie with so many companies. But if these structures are not adopted and the companies don't think, the promoters don't think, the family doesn't think, then you have seen so many cases where the companies just sink because of lack of clarity on the next line of action and succession planning. So it's both. It is protecting the family wealth as well as protecting the succession and running capacity of the company as promoters, as organizers, as well as managers.
There are quite a few parties involved in these sort of services, being private banks, trust companies, lawyers, and consultants. How do they relate to each other?
It's like all the parts which make a car. So all these are interrelated, interdependent. For example, a private bank who is advising the client will not have the capacity to suggest on the legal structures or tax structures. Similarly, a private bank in India or a private banking group in India who does not have a trust company can't offer trust services. So therefore, as a composite solution, what he is going to offer to the client is the lawyers, the chartered accountants, the trust company, who all together can put the right structures and solutions in place. Of course, there is a client choice, like client may have their own set of lawyers or chartered accountants or even a trust company. So that doesn't matter, because then the private banker would be expected to work with all those people. But as a whole, if a private banker is approaching a client for these kind of solutions, the client generally want to keep their personal relations aloof. This is very personal to them. So they generally ask the private banker that whom they can recommend, with whom they can work in confidence. So I think it boils down to mutual confidence of all these service providers with the private bank. And I have seen this personally successfully with Warmond even, where we have got this channel partner concept and most of the banks have been partners there. And they source their clients to us on confidentiality basis. And depending upon the requirement of the client and what the instructions come from the bank, the Warmond opens a dialogue with the chartered accountant and with lawyers. And then they help in putting all these structures in place at one-stop shop. And they also act as the executorship. They provide the executorship services and if required the trusteeship services as well. But in India, most of the cases we have seen is that the owners or the promoters don't want to lose the control of the company. So in majority of the cases, what our experience has been, that even in the trust they want to be holding the managing trustee position. Or the family is there who is some kind of protector mechanism is created, or some mechanism is created that they don't want the institutional trustees for the time being to be in the dominant control of the business or the trust. But all that is workable depending upon the wishes of the family.
What is your advice to private banks in the area of wealth planning?
See, in my experience and interaction with the banks, I find a lot of private banks and foreign banks shirking away to form these trust companies, thinking that the Indian Trust Act is still very rigid and is not that flexible and has not been amended. Here it may be very important to mention that the Indian Trust Act 1882 is a very old act, and the changes which have happened in private capital side and because of the wealth created in the country and those kind of situations which require these trust companies to be incorporated in India, so those have not been addressed as much under the Indian Trust Act. So which is little prohibitory for the banks and financial institutions to consider creating this trust. So I think one possible thing maybe the government of India would consider is that because of changed environment, something could be changed in the Trust Act itself, which gives some comfort to banks and financial institutions to start these kind of services. So there is the necessity and need is quite a bit across country, but there are not good service providers. So therefore this kind of business has not picked up to the extent it should have picked up. So there are unit families, the people don't know how to create a will, where to put the will, who will do the execution if something happens to him. So many documents are lying in the locker which are not even traced. So there is still a huge gap on this service area. Probably there is no direct regulator, and under the Indian Trust Act which exists as of today, these things have not been thought about. So there is a need for the Trust Act to be amended to some extent where these needs are addressed.
What are the avenues available to Indians to invest overseas?
Increasingly, although we have not reached a full convertibility stage, but Government of India has been increasingly amending the provision under FEMA. As of today, there are serious opportunities available to Indians to invest abroad. For example, any individual can invest under the permitted route up to $2 lakh, which is a substantial amount per year. Similarly, the companies, they can invest by incorporating companies abroad or doing some kind of business, and the amount to be invested can be as high as 400% of their net worth, which is again quite a bit. So if they create, for example, some kind of subsidiary abroad, they can put and officially migrate this money there, plus they can raise local equity, local debt in that country. So therefore the possibility of doing business abroad is comparatively easy. There are ways and means, all legal, where they can raise money abroad based on the parameters set in here. There is also under the FEMA an option to pay some kind of royalty fee abroad on which there is no ceiling. So there are several ways where you can put money abroad for legitimate business activities. So normally when we talk about foreign investments, if you see the recent news items also of Cobra Post, where bankers are alleged to have been talking about making investments abroad and this, that. Actually speaking, there are several legal ways to do it, and the shortcuts are not required, which were earlier in existence. So therefore, if a proper legitimate route is considered and that is taken for foreign investments, that could be a very good way for the Indian promoters, investors to use their money and make acquisitions abroad or do business abroad.